So, good afternoon, friends. Hearty welcome to the next edition of the VDMA CEO's Thought Leadership Series. And a pleasure for me today to welcome Mr. Kulmeet Bawa, President and Managing Director, SAP Indian Subcontinent. So, hearty welcome to you, Kulmeet. I would like to briefly introduce Kulmeet first. Kulmeet is a graduate from the Indian School of Business, Hyderabad, and an alumnus of the prestigious National Defence Academy. Prior to his corporate avatar, Kulmeet spent 12 years with the Indian Armored Corps. He has been MD of Adobe for India and South Asia and was COO for Resultix before joining SAP. So a hearty welcome to you, Kulmeet, at this edition of the VDMA Thought Leadership Series.
Thank you so much, Rajesh. Thank you so much, and it's a pleasure, and thank you for inviting me over.
Right, our pleasure to have you on the show today, Kulmeet. Kulmeet, let's come to COVID. Now, COVID has been the hot topic since almost 1.5 years. And it has also actually changed the style of working in India, Kulmeet. My interaction with many of the VDMA member companies in the engineering sector are talking of a hybrid work culture in India. In fact, I wanted to ask you, Kulmeet, what is going to be the new normal at SAP in India? Because you have a large workforce here in India.
Yeah, fantastic. And I just wanted to say that, we've already been living in the new normal for quite some time now, Rajesh, 14, 15 months. So it's when we started off when the pandemic started, it was like something in the distant future. But no longer so, right? We've all had 12, 13, 14 months under our belt of what I would call the new normal. And as an example, before I answer your question, I joined SAP exactly 1 year ago. So this weekend I finished my 1 year.
Congratulations, congrats.
And it's been work from home since the day I've joined. So look at it like this. When we talk about the new normal, I haven't really met anyone from SAP 1 year down the line, virtually, right? I mean, largely, maybe one odd person for a photo shoot. But other than that, I've not met anyone. And it's definitely been a different experience, Rajesh, what we are calling the new normal, right? Very different from the way we've grown up or learned to lead in the yesteryears. And I'm not saying difficult or challenging. I'm just saying it's different, right? Because to build trust and credibility and camaraderie and over screens or impersonal screens, as I call it, is very different from the way we grew up or forging alliances with people you've never met, right? Or doing one-way broadcast without having an audience to interact with or looking or listening to the body language. It's been different, right? So no coffee corners, no offsites, no office huddles like we're used to, but lots of learnings, right? And I talk about it, and yet, I have to say this: business has shot up by several magnitudes in the last 1 year. Customer satisfaction has gone up phenomenally, right? Several basis points, we've got it up. It's so much easier to get customer meetings. I would typically do 2 or 3 meetings, in a day if I can, without the issues of travel from one place to the other and waiting. Productivity has definitely increased, and I'm sure you'll agree with me. Now it's a question, what Lavnish was saying, it's a question of, is there a risk of burnout? That's the way I would look at it. And trust and bonding and empathy, I guess, is at a very high level. And why I talk about it, you mentioned the pandemic, right? So a few months back, and I hope India doesn't forget, but we were reeling under, what I would call the worst humanitarian crisis ever in our history, right? But we found our organizations and our people, employees, very quickly pivoting, Rajesh, to take care of colleagues in the organization, to take care of people outside the organization, the broader community, customers, partners, society at large. So that's been the new normal and the pandemic through my lens the last 1 year. And coming to your point, look, from an SAP perspective, we are almost 5 decades old. So while We celebrate our silver anniversary in India this year, Rajesh, 25 years since we came into India.
Yeah, congratulations again, Kulmeet, for that.
Thank you. And we celebrate 50 years next year globally since we were founded. And SAP has always been known to be this very employee-friendly organization, humane, empathetic work culture. We continue to win those great places or best places to work awards consecutive years, right? So why I raise that is that for us as an organization, I guess flexibility at work was always very prevalent, right? Even before the pandemic. So it isn't something that we force-fitted, but it was always prevalent, and we've always embraced what I would call a location agnostic work style for several decades, as I mentioned. But to your point, yes, I think we managed to raise the bar when it comes to work culture, looking forward, just given the way the world is evolved and all our learnings that I was talking about around collaboration, employee preferences, etc. And we very recently, it's all over the news, we've launched something that we call the Pledge to Flex, Rajesh, right? Which is 100% flexible and a trust-based workplace, which is the norm and not the exception. So we call it the Pledge to Flex, and it's purely based on trust. And this is our commitment, if I can call it that, to our employees to continue running at their personal best, whether you're working from home or office or remotely, irrespective of where you are. And this initiative is truly hybrid. To your point, it's a hybrid work culture. We have flexibility of timings, flexible work schedules, agnostic of where you work from. I won't care. And the power of this decision, right? We are trying to delegate it to the leaders. So for me, it comes down to a market unit level. I further delegate it to the next level leaders so that they can decide, whether they want to meet once in a week in the office, whether they want a touchdown office to catch up, whether they want a once a month offsite at a country level, So a lot of empowerment there, truly hybrid in the sense of the word. And that's where we are, right? And it's almost as if when I was I was on LinkedIn, I think, the other day, and it almost seemed as if trust is that new currency, right? While it was always there. But today, when you talk about hybrid and the way the world is evolved, it's almost like trust is that brand new currency that we brought forth to the world. Sorry, long answer, but I wanted to give you an idea of what the new normal means for me.
No, thanks. Thanks, Kulmeet, for detailing it out. And I think when I see the social media posts, I must compliment SAP for all the efforts it's taking to take care of its employees. And I think also in this, as you rightly mentioned, in the new normal, the best fit in the new normal, I think. Yeah. Kulmeet, going ahead, if we talk about the MSME sector in India, Kulmeet, now, MSMEs form the backbone of India's economy. They contribute almost about 30% to the GDP of the country. 50% of the exports come from the MSME sector, and it employs around 110 million or 120 million people. Now, due to the pandemic, especially the small, mid-sized companies have been impacted. Kulmeet, what does SAP India has to offer to these MSMEs, and how can SAP support them in their growth, especially in these critical times?
Yeah, no, thank you for that question. And Rajesh, we had an event a few weeks ago, which is our flagship event called Sapphire Now. We do it annually, and we had the minister, Shri Arvind Thakur, with me on a panel. We were talking only about MSMEs and what happens in India. But to your question, look, MSMEs are definitely key to the SAP strategy, SAP India strategy, right? And I think we're making a lot of headway in this segment, and it's also personally very close to my heart. And I'll tell you why, right? Because the patriot in me continues to live on. While it's been 3 decades or more, but it continues to live on. And I just feel that this is one mechanism, right, by which we can truly impact the Indian economy, like you said. And we've been seeing a lot of traction from this segment, even over the last 6, 7, 8 months, despite the impact of the pandemic, Rajesh. Yeah, and I'll tell you what shifts or changes that I'm seeing, and then I'll touch on one or two more things from what SAP is doing in that segment to try and help. But definitely, I think this business landscape today, the MSME landscape, is being characterized by what we would see, a lot of volatile demand and supply, no brainer, given the pandemic. Socially distanced manufacturing is what we are seeing all over, with minimal touch points, touch supply chains, or minimal touch supply chains would be a better way to put it. And the pandemic has definitely brought digital first or digital only, in a lot of cases to the forefront, especially in the MSMEs. And I'm seeing that across the landscape, even across some of the largest enterprises, conglomerates, agnostic of which industry segments they sit in, but more so in the MSMEs. We are seeing that hunger to develop more resilient, agile models, to very quickly move on to cloud technologies. And this is what the landscape has been over the last few months of the pandemic. And three big pieces, and like I said, SAP is definitely very, very hungry to do a lot more in this segment. And we've done a ton of research and surveys, etc. Three big things that came out in terms of a demand from this segment. Number one was the request or the requirement or the ask for gaining access to global markets. Okay, so no longer did this segment want to remain dovetailed within the country, and essentially, look at it as global sourcing, which became so much more important during the pandemic, Rajesh, right? And just the volatility of the domestic demand that we've been seeing, is what probably was a motivator for that request. And what we did in turn was, we've got something called the SAP Ariba Discovery Networks. I won't get into the tech part of it, but some of the largest business networks in the world. And we opened that up for the MSME segment free of cost, so that the buyers and the suppliers, they could start posting their sourcing needs, etc., and get connected to some of the suppliers, irrespective of where in the world you are. So that was one ask that we had. The second was, and SAP being best in class, I think that's a given. But the ask was, how can we make our technology more affordable for this segment, right? Because everyone could afford it. And I think we made a dent there with our, it was an initiative under the Bharat ERP, what we term, where we, put in something called the Business One starter pack for this segment at affordable prices, so that they could get or transition onto the whole digital bandwagon with our help, right? From an affordable. And the third piece, of course, that came up was around digital skilling, right? Or the availability of the talent pool, which we know is so important for India all across, but more so for the SMEs. And for this again, we've got lots of initiatives. We run our flagship program called the Code Unnati, which is purely around skilling, a very highly awarded, rewarded Golden Peacock and several other coveted awards. But so look, we are solving for some of these areas, and the great part is that we see a lot of customers, and I can rattle off 20 names for you in this segment, who are creating magic, Rajesh. And I won't do that. I know we have a limited time, but some really cool customers, like this friend of mine who runs a company called Way Cool, right, in the agri-food space. It's a startup which has got some amazing funding over the last few months, and they're transforming their whole farm to fork, if I can call it that, the whole farm to fork supply chain. And today they are serving 19,000 clients, 50,000 farmers, some crazy numbers, and we help them set up their robust supply chains, etc. So look, I could go on. This is an important segment. We are trying our best. We are seeing a lot of success, and yet the feeling is there's so much more we can do, Rajesh.
Absolutely. I think very, very well put, Kulmeet. I think all 3 points you mentioned are so very much relevant for the MSMEs as to really buck up and boost their contribution, especially in these difficult times. In fact, going a little deeper, Kulmeet, when we talk about, there was a McKinsey study, and they mentioned about this missing middle, in the sense that we have a lot of small enterprises, but we have very few mid-size and large enterprises. Now, in your view, Kulmeet, how can India overcome perhaps the drawbacks of this missing middle? Or what would be the way forward, Kulmeet?
Yeah, look, I wouldn't prophesize that I'm the expert. That's the disclaimer. But here's what I know, Rajesh, right? So we've got about 600 odd large firms, since you said large, medium, and the bottom of the pyramid. We've got about 600 large firms, which we classify over that 500 million turnover mark, right? And we've got about 1,500 mid-sized firms per trillion of GDP in the country. Now, when you and mid-size is as per that study is 40 to 500 odd million. That's the segment that they're calling mid-size. And I think if you look at both, to your point, the large as well as the mid-size firms, very clearly we are not faring well. I'll just put it at that. I wouldn't say we are half of the other Southeast Asian countries or 1/3 of China, and so I'm not talking specific comparisons, but we are definitely not where some of our peer emerging economies are. So I think to your point, you're absolutely right. I would say that the need of the hour for us as a nation is to triple probably and it should be on both segments, right? As per me, we need to triple or quadruple the large enterprises and enable thousands of more the mid-sized firms, Rajesh, to climb that ladder. And what this will do first, and then I'll venture into what I think the country can do. But I think it will help turbocharge that entire competitive or the dynamism in that area. It will help boost growth and job creation and build more productivity across. And another thing that it'll specifically do, right, as per me, is and when I talk about high performing teams, I always talk about this, Rajesh, that it'll also get mid-sized firms. These mid-sized firms moving up will help increase that whole competitive pressure on the large firms, right? So when you have people breathing down your neck is when you perform and you up the bar for yourself. And I think that's really required today. So Rajesh, yes, the requirement is there. And if I was to venture into what, broadly, there's a very high cost of compliance today in India, right? Just organizational resources, managing very costly procedures sometimes is too expensive for some of these mid-sized firms, which could be an inhibitor as per me. Second is, low cost capital. The access or fluidity of that is still limited as per me, while we are seeing a lot of it coming into our startup world today with one of the largest startup ecosystems mushrooming. But I still think there's a lot we could do there. And then again, acquisition of real estate, just the construction permits or the taxation laws, etc. So if I was to summarize, I think we need to further work on, and nowhere am I saying that we've not done enough. I think we made a good headway as a country. But I think we could do a lot more around the infrastructure reforms, number one, whether it is, like I mentioned, just the simplification of the acquisition or land acquisition rules. When it comes to power, I think both on distribution and affordability for the MSMEs, that's another big area where I think we could work on. From a fiscal reforms, of course, we need more access or fluidity to working capitals, and I think that's getting more and more important through my lens. We spoke about skilling earlier, but we need a much bigger pipeline. So that again, I think if I was to look at the whole manpower piece or manpower reforms, if there was a silver bullet that we could use to skill a lot more people, I would definitely call that out. And lastly, from a tech perspective, I think a lot of operational improvements within these organizations are hugely necessary today, Rajesh, right? So they need systems, they need processes in place to make them globally competitive, right? And technology, of course, and folks like ourselves play a huge role there. So those are my views on your missing middle, Rajesh.
Right. Thank you. I think very insightful, Kulmeet, and you've touched upon several important points. And also you mentioned about the infrastructure. In fact, the logistic cost is one of the highest in India. We have almost about 8 to 10%, whereas the global average is only about 5 to 6%, and largely due to our poor infrastructure in the country, Kulmeet. Kulmeet, when we taking a little further with the MSME discussion, now generally there is a little misconception that to integrate intelligent automation, go for digitization, the firms may need to divest from their outdated infrastructure or legacy applications. However, there are, I think, modern solutions available. And what would be your views here, Kulmeet?
Look, my thoughts, Rajesh. Number one, I think the decision to, re-architect, lift and shift, or rip and replace versus going in piecemeal or in a phased manner, right? So there's no one answer in my head. I think it depends on one, what is the present as is status of that MSME or enterprise or whichever segment you look at, right? That's point one. Second, what I would always view or look at is what's the vision, right? Where does that business want to be? What's the magnitude of scale that they are expecting? What's the vision the world is so flat today. You could dream of space and setting up something in 3 years' time with the whole the Virgin Galactica taking off the other day, right? So the vision becomes very, very important to me, especially in these dynamic changing conditions. And I'll amplify, right? And the fact that we work with almost 13,500 enterprises or MSMEs in the country and 400,000 across, I think we've got a fair view or a fair flavor of when we recommend a piecemeal or when we recommend building something from the scratch with offering our help, of course, which is sometimes prescriptive, but prescriptive best practices for, especially when it comes to small and medium businesses. And if I was to, so if you look at digital natives today, right, and we are talking about the startup ecosystem, they've got the funding, we are talking about MSMEs, their business model very often is hinged on brand new greenfield architectures, right? And which in our parlance at SAP we call a true north architecture. And again, I'll leave jargon out of this conversation, but look at it like this, that architecture is greenfield, up from the scratch, built on cloud native foundational capabilities with microservices and event-based processes, multi-cloud automation. However, when we look at the brick and mortar or the a segment that I guess VDMA deals with a lot also, the non-digital native businesses, they have best-in-class processes and a wealth of data, to your point, in the legacy applications that have been running those enterprises or MSMEs for years and decades at a stretch. So there, of course, the objective is not to rip and replace, not to do, it's more of a brownfield implementation that we suggest where, how do you harness the power of all that you've built over the last few years or decades so that you can meet that current growth. So again, obviously rip and replace will not work there, but the organizations like that would need flexibility to transform at their own speed or pace or so that they can accelerate the transition when they feel like, for example, legacy applications can first be transformed by extending the systems and processes and data to integrate seamlessly before you get on to the next phase of, we want to make you into an intelligent enterprise or into an intelligent automation phase. So I think I would just say that, both things work, but absolutely not that you pick up this and throw everything else out. And I don't think today we are in a world of that, right? Because everything is based on open APIs and open API based architecture, which actually
Yes.
enables integration irrespective of, whether SAP is giving something or some competitor's got another or a startup is coming. I think those are some of the very basics of what we are seeing today. And, the interconnected economy or the business networks I was talking about would fail miserably if we were not to look at it in this fashion. Rajesh.
Absolutely, Kulmeet. And I think we are very much in sync with what you mentioned, Kulmeet. In fact, as VDMA, we've been very active on open platform communication, united architecture. So we've been trying to promote the benefits of OPC UA in India, especially with the industry, with the mid-sized industry. And I'm sure the points you mentioned, Kulmeet, would be of immense benefit for all our viewers, because especially in India, we have this legacy machines and people people want to utilize what is available. And as you correctly said, it is first to see what is the what is the present situation, and where does the MSME want to move in the next stage. So thank you for these inputs, Kulmeet. We are running short of time, Kulmeet, so I'll quickly come to the last couple of questions, Kulmeet. Maybe one more on a personal front, Kulmeet. You've been with the armed forces, Kulmeet, a proud Fauji in that sense. And what are the learnings, Kulmeet, if I were to ask you for one or two learnings from what you had at your armed forces tenure and what you could implement in the corporate world, Kulmeet?
Oh wow, you're taking me down to yesteryears. And,
down the memory lane.
I was 16 when I joined NDA, and at that time it was after grade 11, 16 and a half, got commissioned at 20, right? So look, Rajesh, thanks for that. And look, I don't think the rules of the games change, right? And I'm a firm opinion, while the media may ask me something, and the basic tenets of leadership remain the same. Point number one. And whether it's the battlefield or whether it's the sales field, I guess it's the same. And the basic tenets of whether it's discipline that you ingrain within yourself at those early years, like I said, the formative years, whether it was with the danda that they thrusted into us. But I guess they stay with you. Collaboration and teamwork, I would say, is the next, right? So there is no other way. So we've not learned to be cowboy country, every man for himself. The way we grew up was always it's the team that always wins, right? So I think it's the same thing that's working for me so far in the civvy street, as I call it. And then again, empathy, right? So was probably the third piece, because it's not something that you put in or for definitions, but it just gets ingrained into you, because people are center to everything that you do, whether it's in the armed forces or whether it's in the corporate world. So those will be the top two or three. If you can sort out the power of people, and then of course for me personally, I've had these what do I call it? Sort of leadership mantras that and I was seeing it's been 30 years. I've definitely started feeling old, but leadership mantras, whether it's a shared vision and how do you build that shared vision to get people to row in the same direction seamlessly, or how do you build this whole, I keep calling it the playing for failure syndrome. How do you build a safety net for people? So tons of stuff, but I'll pause since we are running out of time, Rajesh.
Right. No, thanks, Kulmeet. And perhaps the last question for today, Kulmeet, which I think would be of immense benefit also to all our CEOs of the German companies who would be watching this edition. Kulmeet, actually, with the present scenario, with so many unforeseen factors colliding together at once, the role or job of a CEO has taken new turns. And I think there are many new challenges in these unprecedented times. So I would like you, I would request you to share perhaps 3 tips, Kulmeet, how CEOs can navigate their boat in the stormy water of the unprecedented situation.
I love the way you put it, right? All the cliches, stormy water. No, but I get your point. Look, I'll tell you, the way I'm looking at it, and I'm not saying this is gospel, right? But number one, and I was touching upon it, is the power of people. So what I would always recommend, to teams, to leaders, is recognize and thrive on the power of people. Invest on people, right? Because people are at the center of everything, Rajesh, to me. And they will remain your biggest asset, irrespective of stormy waters or whatever's in store for us going forward. That's point number one, right? And if you can build empathy and mutual trust and respect that I was talking about, and if you can build an ecosystem or an organization or a business based on that, I guess whether it's employees or vendors or suppliers or anyone in the ecosystem, that's my first. And I always start with people, right? Not with technology. So that's the first input. Second, of course, from a tech perspective, and we spoke about it, I just feel more than ever today, if not already done, but put digital at the absolute core of your strategy, right? That would be my second piece of advice. And we've seen this in the pandemic where, nobody in the last 1 year had asked me on the why should we transform into a digital first it's only about how quickly. Questions that come up are how can we move holistically? How can we look at it as a business transformation rather than a technology lift and shift? So that's the second piece of input that I would have. Look forward, look at the speed of execution, look at long term, look at the moonshots, right? Like we say. And the third one, probably, Rajesh, would be something very close to my heart, right? And to all the leaders out there, find an alignment between your purpose as an individual and the organizational purpose. Okay, so that purpose piece again is super important, at least for me, right? And start to motivate your teams towards a sustainable and an inclusive growth. I know heavy words, but very, very important, Rajesh, right? So create a culture of building a business that goes beyond the conventional revenues and top lines and bottom lines that we do so well, right? Start looking at that green line where SAP is really helping the world today to save our planet. And as you know, and not to sound theatrical, but the pace at which we are consuming resources today is twice as fast as our planet can replenish, Rajesh. And at this pace and speed, we will need another whole new planet just to give us the resources that we need. So that would be my third point. Start measuring the green line of your business in addition to top lines and bottom lines. Rajesh, over to you.
Right. Thank you. I think very, very good points. You mentioned power of people adopting digital strategy and aligning individuals with the organization for inclusive growth, Kulmeet. And in fact, Kulmeet, I just wanted to share with you as our tagline at VDMA, we have humans, machines, and progress. So we believe that humans and machines work together for the progress of the society, for the progress of the world. So that's our tagline, and it passes very well with your thoughts also, Kulmeet. Yeah. So Kulmeet, on behalf of the German Engineering Federation, all our members, I would like to thank you for sparing your time to be with us for this edition of the VDMA CEO's Thought Leadership series, Kulmeet, and wishing you and the team at SAP India all the very best, Kulmeet, and stay in touch and stay connected, Kulmeet.
Thank you, Rajesh. Thank you again for having me over. It was not only a pleasure, it was also a privilege. Thank you, and
right. Thank you, Kulmeet. Right. Take care. Bye. Goodbye.